Hello. This is a Horror Obsessive original story. The Sacrifice of the Old 18th is a brilliantly atmospheric piece of horror flash fiction. Colorfully set during 1913 in the American South, the story enjoys a historical flavor and a vernacular you'll find just as charming as disturbing. The Sacrifice of the Old 18th is about the aftermath of war, the way legend and history are not always the same, and what it does to the minds of the men who have to suffer through it. Viewer discretion is advised, as there are depictions of implied violence that may disturb some audiences. Thank you for your continued support of Horror Obsessive, and please enjoy The Sacrifice of the Old 18th.
The Sacrifice of the Old 18th by Wade Newhouse. Read by the author. Mr. Cadmus Tolliver, age 20, believed that May 2nd, 1913 was a very good Friday indeed, as he stepped off the streetcar at the Raleigh Soldiers' Home. He allowed himself to feel the weight of the 50 years ticking away in a slow progression, like a cog in a great historical clock. The building he had come to find was a sparse, thin-looking structure, much faded from what appeared in photographs, and instinctively Cadmus Tolliver removed his hat in reverence. Under the glare of the southern sun, the paint had peeled, the proud gables were sagging, and the windows were tinted with gloom. If this was indeed a home for old remembered glory, the warping wood and rusty nailheads testified that its heroism was whispering away rather than proudly shouting its accomplishments. A front veranda, 4 steps up from the dusty ground, unsteadily shielded the front of the house from the sun, and on the veranda were seated, in a rough semicircle of rocking chairs, 5 old men. Cadmus Tolliver saw their age and slouching degradation binding them together, as if they were not men, but a photograph of a sacred ideal. They were all of a type, 5 variations on a theme that Cadmus Tolliver had known his whole life from books and public ceremonies and stories told by his elders. One of them was larger than the others. He sat at one end of the group, apart with his mouth slightly open, wet. The others were pale and gray, pasty, with thin, pursed lips that trembled slightly. Sweat glistened on their foreheads, and tiny insects swarmed in clouds around their heads. "It is," said Cadmus Tolliver, bowing, "a great honor to meet you on this day." None of the old men moved. They continued to stare up at him dumbly. "I have studied," he tried again, "your service and your sacrifices, from the time I was a boy." The large man coughed, struggled to clear something from the back of his throat. The other 4 slowly looked in his direction. "We thank you kindly," he said, and his voice was loose and wet, uncertain. "Do you not," said Cadmus Tolliver, "have any other visitors today? I had thought that I might be merely one among many." "I wouldn't know," said the old man. "At some point all days start to stack up the same. Ain't that right, boys?" Cadmus Tolliver started. "But today is the 2nd day of May. 50 years to the day since the 18th North Carolina Volunteers went into action at Chancellorsville. 50 years since General Jackson received his mortal wound. You were there. In fact, they say that the fatal shot must have come from your own ranks." The 5 old men exchanged empty glances. "Huh," said the one who spoke. "Can't say that I knew that. What about you boys? You know that?" There was some shuffling and restless coughing. The larger man looked back at Cadmus Tolliver, who for the first time on this special day felt uncomfortable. He felt that the old men were watching him, but seeing him as something strange, something black in their long, restless memories. "Well, I do hope I haven't said anything improper. I think many people think of the 2nd of May as an important date. A date on which regular men entered into the halls of legend, however random and unfortunate the moment that propelled them there." The man sitting on the end of the line was the thinnest of the group. Little more than gray bones held together by scarred skin. He raised his face up toward Cadmus Tolliver for the first time now. One eyeball was missing, the socket sewed up with thick black stitches. The other eye rolled lazily. That there's Ratio. Don't he look a fright? He ain't had a healthy day. Well, hell, I guess it's been almost 50 years, too. He's a lucky son of a bitch, though. Took plenty of lead and iron himself. All of Cadmus Tolliver's old fascination came back, and he saw that the thin man on the end was, in fact, missing a foot and his entire left arm. The heavy man nodded. You'd be surprised what a man can live without. The other four men nodded in various degrees of vigor. The one called Ratio seemed barely able to lift his head, and he vaguely bobbed it instead. Cadmus Tolliver's emotions returned in sudden bursts. Tell me, he said, eagerly struggling to put into words the ideas that he had spent his entire young life trying to build up in his head out of reading and imagining. How does it feel to know that you men can see your very names in the written records of great deeds? The big man stared. I don't see my name written anywhere, young man. And great deeds, well, everyone is always dying, and I guess we will do our own soon enough. Cadmus Tolliver said, The prophet tells us that God will bring bodies from their graves and restore them to their Israel. The fat ghost man searched his face some more, and then his trembling lips curled down into a sort of smile, mostly toothless, stubbled, drool-stained. A tomb-like odor of decay and mold drifted in from the leaning house. It felt, to Cadmus Tolliver, as if silence had become a solid, oppressive thing. Clouds were moving in from the west, and what had been bright sunny heat was now becoming humid, damp. A shadow crossed over the leaning shape of the veranda, and the old wood creaked when someone's chair shifted. I think perhaps, he said, searching for the most honorable of words, that I should go and leave you to your peace. Another restless chuckle was shared by the line of men, greasy, wet, spoiled like vegetables in the sun. Cadmus Tolliver was beginning to feel that he had made a mistake. I will take up no more of your valuable time, gentlemen, but allow me to say again how honored I am to have met you today. He strained to think. The great state of North Carolina is ennobled by your sacrifice. The one who had been speaking spit something violently at the warped boards beneath his feet. I think that's fine. Ain't it, boys? Ain't that fine? The hot silence was broken by a cacophony of wheezing, laughing, and thigh-slapping, spitting, growly rumbling. Cadmus Tolliver could think of nothing else to do. He bowed and stepped quietly from the veranda then, feeling beneath the increasing heat, almost oppressive suddenly, that he had touched the historical and made his own infinitely small contribution to it. Blessed be the tie. Afterwards, Big Jim laughed that laugh that he always did, and the spit and the dirt dripped and pooled and stretched from his mouth. Lots to do, boys, lots to do. It was the anniversary again, sure enough, so they passed the tattered old Bible around. Then the forbidden bottle tip-topped man to man to prepare for the ritual they had created to make the voices stop. There had been voices off and on ever since that hot night in the woods when the general had wandered into their lines and someone had fired those shots. There had been something out there then, something more than danger, more than fear, that some men had claimed to see. They had been unable to describe it. They had jumped at it, and then Stonewall had fallen. Then there were whispers in later nights, accusations, denials, protestations. They returned to families and did not speak of it, then grew old and came to this place. And then Ezekiel Tittle had hacked himself to death in the dark, screaming that he could not stop seeing. Men dropped off more often now, taken away in boxes to be with their fellows at Oakwood, and the ones left were weaker, and the work was harder to do. But the dead still demanded memory and payment. In the midst of the valley full of bones. Now, boys, extra for old Ratio, the son of a bitch who gets the pain, gets the pleasure, ain't that right? That's the rule, always has been, when it's your turn. Too much for a man to swallow. The whiskey burned and numbed, and the blood and pain from the past was there and not there together. Where'd I hide that knife last time? Anybody know? Hey, who's holding him down? What'll it be, boys? 50 years. Sure, that deserves something different. Maybe permanent. What you boys say? It had been a mistake. The ones who had gone had followed from the woods all the way back home, whispering and peering in the windows during thunderstorms, staring from closets they could never use in faded clothing they would never change. In the dark of the night, after the nightmares, they waited at the foot of rickety beds, grasped at bare feet, cried from sorrow they no longer remembered. Eventually, they recalled only arms and legs stacked in the summer heat, swirling with flies, bandages caked with mud, wooden boxes stacked beneath windows where girls held basins that sweated like men. I will lay sinews upon you and will bring up flesh upon you. Another highball, maybe something deeper. Damn, you need to hold him more still than a Jesus Christ. Let me cut. Just a mistake. Bones came together, bone to his bone. A sacrifice.
This has been a Horror Obsessive original story. If you liked it, please subscribe to our channel for more and check out our previous stories. You can also check out horrorobsessive.com for interesting articles on horror of all kinds. And if you're interested in becoming one of our writers, please follow the link in the description below.